Imagine waiting 2 weeks to know if you got a like or not, or a thumbs up. In the decades before the internet, people made comics, and we reached out to each other. What was it like? This is the Sequential Artists Workshop, and these are the 90s mini comics oral history archives. Come join us as we take a longer look at those analog days when communication was a lot slower, maybe more deliberate, maybe more reckless. Who knows? It was just different. Join us as we take a look and really notice how much things have changed. Come join us on the socials. Sometimes it's Comics Workshop, sometimes it's Saw Comics. Either way, come check us out and welcome.
Mike Taylor. It is May 27th, and I'm in St. Augustine, Florida.
Nice. Cool place to be. I wish I was there right now on the beach. I do. I really do. What are some comics publications that you created or were a part of in the pre-internet era or 90s, 80s, whatever?
Well, I mean, most of that history for me, like I was a kid in the literal pre-internet time.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I I grew up in a small town in Alabama called Phoenix City,
Mm-hmm.
and there was there were like a group of like legit old school underground cartoonists that lived across the river in Columbus, Georgia, and they had a whole little micro publishing scene. And I made a horror comic when I was 12 years old.
Oh, heck yeah.
Um, and I sold it at the local comic shop, and they found me through that. And we just had a mail and phone relationship. They were like adults. And at first they didn't know I was like not even a teenager. Um, but then the stuff that people know me for isn't really pre-internet. It's just that I was a really late adopter. So that and it was pre wide usage of the internet. So and at first I didn't really think I was a participant in the comics world. Like I was just doing like punk zines.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a zine called Scenery. Um, and over the course of many, many years, it just had more and more art in it. And then some people I knew in Gainesville who had kept up with comics throughout the years kind of helped me close
Mm-hmm.
that world. And there was a comics anthology in Gainesville called We Don't Go to Their Parties that
Mm-hmm.
was put out by Travis Fristow. And he asked me to contribute something. And that was the first time I had done like a proper comic in like
Yeah.
10 years. And it wasn't a proper comic because I just kind of rebelled against the form. And I just did like a situationist kind of cut and paste thing. Um, and then I didn't start making like actual sequential art for another couple of years after that. And then the name of the zine Scenery changed to Late Era Clash, and then there were more comics involved in that. And then when I moved to Rhode Island, there was a really strong like punk comic world. Um, but by then, like we were firmly in the internet.
Yeah.
So that's nice. Yeah, so that's most of my comics life.
What was the name of the horror comic when you were a kid? I'm curious. Is it still out there?
I mean, it was called Really Weird
Okay.
because I was just I was really into stuff like Mr. Monster
Mm-hmm.
and all the Clive Barker comics. Um, and I just wanted to make like an EC style
Mm-hmm.
horror comic, but I didn't know how to do it, so I just like copied from the comics that I was collecting at the time.
I mean, that's how you learn how to do it, so I don't see
Sure.
anything wrong with that.
Yeah, that's always how you learn.
It's interesting how you mentioned they weren't proper comics when you were doing later comics. I feel like comics are so undefined, there is no such thing as an improper comic. How would you yourself describe the comics work you were doing?
At what point?
Um, how about scenery? Describe that.
Um, okay, that was mostly just, I think now they would call it what do they call it? It was almost just like a glorified diary. It was just
Okay. Yeah.
personal writing and writing about travel and writing about bands. And I was in art school and I was making paintings and collages. So it was a lot of Xerox art.
Mm-hmm.
Like I learned how to make acetone transfers when I was a
Yeah.
teenager, and that was just a huge part of everything. I would like make those and then embellish it with ink lines and a lot of Xerox manipulation, like learning how to really use the old
Mm-hmm.
analog Xerox machines, dragging your image across the platen and things like that, and like refeeding in um, your copies to get super saturation and copies of copies. I was just really interested in that kind of like analog technology and its limitations and how you could exploit that.
From what years did scenery and late era clash run?
Um, let's say 1994 to 2015.
Okay.
I think so.
That's a that's a good run. That's a good run.
Yeah. I mean, I've made plenty of stuff outside of that, but
Mm-hmm.
as far as having like a schedule where I felt like I needed to be working on a
Mm-hmm.
serialized work, that those were the years.
Okay. And whoops, went too far in my questions. Um, how did you make the comics? I want to know like the tools involved, the writing materials, the paper, the printers, all of that.
Okay, well, when I first started when I was a kid, it was just both my parents worked in offices, and I would just get Xerox paper from them. And my dad was a draftsman for the gas company, so
Mhm.
he brought me home a set of repeatograph pens. Um, do you know repeatograph pens, right?
I don't think I do. I mean, I might when you describe them, but if you want to show them,
Like,
I would love to see them.
like this.
Nay, they
They're
look fancier.
they they're wildly unpopular because they're really hard to keep clean. Like this one's clogged right now for sure. Um, but so I would do my roughs in like a regular number two pencil,
Hmm.
and then to make it legible to the Xerox machine, I would use a repeatograph until I broke it, and and then I would Xerox them when my parents had to work on weekends. They would let me go, and I would use the Xerox machine at their offices.
Hmm.
So that was the earliest stuff, and I don't. I think there's a lot of whiteout involved. Um,
Yeah, whiteout's great stuff.
yeah. Um, but yeah, just really simple. I would use a ruler because I felt like panels, like in all the mainstream comics, the panels were straight. So I would use that. I didn't know about like a T-square yet. Um, and then the first time I made a comic, like that horror comic, I only made like 50, and they were full 8.5 by 11 size, and I hand colored all the covers.
That's amazing.
It's
What did you use
stupid.
to color? It's amazing. What color? How did you color it?
Uh, I think I use markers
Wow. Okay, yeah, that would take a
if
long
I can
time.
remember.
You must have been like drying out so many markers doing that. I can't even imagine.
I think so, yeah.
Did the tools change when you started working on scenery and late era Clash, or were they about the same?
Well, by that point, I like did zines all the way through high school. like really elementary little like music zines. And so I kind of got more how to present. I learned how to like do my text on grid paper, and I learned how to use like a non-reproducing blue pen. Um, and so I did that a lot, but it was still just like I didn't even have a waxer. Like, do you know what a waxer is?
Nope. I'm a baby.
Okay, yeah, cool. There's no need for you to know. But like, big zines, um, like Fact Sheet 5, Maximum Rock and
Mhm.
Roll, like all the big ones. They before desktop publishing, they used a waxer, which is like it's like just a large scale glue stick basically. But
Oh wow.
I didn't have one, so I just used regular glue sticks and Scotch tape. And uh, when you work with ink and Scotch tape, the fingerprints get on the Scotch tape, and so that
Yeah.
really became a part of like the style for me. Like the messier, the better.
Yeah, I really like that. I really like when I find messy comics. It's cathartic to read, to me, personally.
I think so.
Yeah, I would
I
agree.
still think that.
How did you ready these comics for print exactly?
Um, that yeah, that's always the hardest part. And like I still have to think about that. Like I still make books and I have to make an actual dummy,
Yeah, me too.
small scale
Math
dummy
problem.
because yeah, because I can't, I just can't keep track of like the rule of fours and everything. So so yeah, I would make a dummy and handwrite and pencil the page number
Hmm.
and then take it apart and I would have my flats and then I would just glue everything into the proper page order and take it down to the copy shop in Gainesville, which is no longer there.
Oh man. Yeah, we have like a Renaissance now is I think are the the publisher we have, other than Office Depot, of course.
Yeah, yeah. We There was one on the corner of University and 13th that was called Target Copy,
Too bad it's
and
gone.
it was 24 hours, and I lived one block away.
That's amazing. You just had to walk
It
down there and make those comics.
it was yeah, it was amazing, and it was like kind of a hangout scene. Like you would go at like 2 a.m. because there was only two people working, and
Hmm.
inevitably you would run into someone who's also making their zine.
That's amazing. I need to go hang
Yeah,
out at the print shops until I find other comics makers. They've got to show up eventually. You said
that's that's how I met John Orth. I don't know if you know who he is, but he was a pretty important Gainesville artist for a long time. He made comics. Um, he wouldn't call them that, but they were comics. And I would fish his trash out of the recycling and collect it. And then one day I saw him there and I was like, "You make these." And I showed him my folder.
that's amazing. What did he think?
We're still friends to this day.
Amazing.
Yeah,
I love that. Collect people's trash and then befriend them. That's I like that. I'm gonna use that
exactly.
tactic time. I'm
It
definitely gonna
works for
use
the CIA.
it. You said you printed 50 of your first comic. When you were doing like a serialized one, how many did you print of those?
Well, when I first started, like the first couple issues were probably like 100, and I would use all these kind of stupid Baroque strategies, which was really in fashion at the time. Like the first one, the cover was I had gotten a bunch of vacuum cleaner bags,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like this papery canvas type material. So I made the covers out of that, and I screen printed the logo on the cover. Um, so that was kind of limited. And then when that ran out, I actually took some thrift store shirts and
Oh
cut
wow.
those down to 8.5 by 11 and did the rest of the print run that way.
That's awesome. At least you weren't using markers anymore.
No,
That's
no, I barely graduated from markers.
but I feel like the new way had to be quicker at least.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure. Um a while back, when was the first evidence you saw of other people making comics? The people that inspired you to start?
Um, well, it's basically after I made that first one
Mhm.
and sold it at the Columbus Book Exchange in Columbus, Georgia, and I had my address in it.
Mhm.
And somebody named William Dockery wrote me a letter, and he did a self-published comic called Demon House Theater that was a little quarter size, and that was the first like kind of home cooked comic I had ever seen. And at first, I was like, "Oh, this guy doesn't know how to draw, and he doesn't know how to tell a story." And looking back on it, I just realized I was lucky enough to see like a really abstract Gary Panter influenced comic for the first time. Because I just thought, I was still in that mindset when you're young, like there's only one way to draw and it's the right way. So I was trying to learn from like John Byrne and Bernie Wrightson, uh, Bill Sienkiewicz sometimes, things like that.
Are there any other comics you received that surprised or inspired you? I like to hear about weird comics people find.
Well, yeah, after he mailed me Demon House Theater, it kind of opened the floodgates, and I started getting Fact Sheet 5 in the mail,
Mhm.
because back then if you had something reviewed in Fact Sheet 5, they would send you an issue. So I never had a subscription, but I published in anthologies and stuff, like local comics, enough that I was always getting one in the mail. So the girth of Fact Sheet 5 just led me to think that like everybody in the world was a self-publisher.
Yeah. Were there any other magazines like that, Comics FX or SPCE, that you wrote to or received comics from?
No, I wasn't aware of those at the time. Because there's a little zine from Columbus, Georgia as well called Comic Update.
Mhm.
And they just basically reviewed things that people sent them in the mail. And so they asked me to start reviewing comics for them, but I was like
That's
13 years old. And so people just started sending me comics for review, and they were all weird. Like back then everything had poetry in it. So a lot of poetry. And then I would just glean information about all these people. Turns out one of them was a cop, one of them worked at McDonald's, like um really strange world for a 13-year-old.
yeah, it sounds really fun and crazy and also scary, but fun.
Mostly fun, but there's this one dude who I'm not going to name because I don't know what happened to him. But he was this dude from like Sacramento or something
Mhm.
who did straight up like Desaad style porn.
And your 13-year-old self was receiving it in the mail.
Yeah,
Wild.
with like very crude ink drawings. Um, and I read the fuck out of it. Um, it I learned some things way too early that probably damaged me, but I'm okay so far.
Yeah, I think my whole generation, because of the internet, is having that same experience, just instead of having comics sent to us,
Oh,
honestly.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. For sure.
Did you ever advertise yourself in Fact Sheet 5?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that I every time I put something out, I would send it to them. I still have those copies somewhere. I save everything.
That's awesome. If you want to pull them out at the end, I'd love to look at them because
Oh,
yes, this will be in video format. So
they are deeply buried. I
okay, okay,
like
don't worry about it then.
the entire footprint of my bed is underneath is plastic containers full of that stuff.
Okay, I won't force you to drag that out then. That sounds
Okay.
it could potentially be messy or catastrophic in
Yes, yes.
um who would you say is your closest friend or peer in comics making?
Well, that's tough. I mean, there's so many people, there's so many friends.
You can name a few. It's fine.
Uh, I mean, currently I'm really divorced from the comic world, but
Except for the stuff under your bed, of course.
well, I mean the current comic world. I don't know that much about what's going on right now, but the people that were like really instrumental when I was making comics a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Christopher Forgus, who works under the name CF, um, was a we worked together a lot. We were really close friends for a long time. Jason Miles in Seattle, he used to work for Fantagraphics. He was he's just a he's one of those no rules guys. And his love for comics is so total and vast that I could send him like the loosest interpretation of like sequential storytelling. And he's like, yeah, it's a comic, love it. Um, I mean, Tom Hart was the first like let's say like regular comics guy
Mm-hmm.
that I met face to face in Gainesville, like that was like seriously publishing
Yeah.
as a true believer. Um, John Porcellino is just huge, he's he was somebody that I used to correspond with, and I kept up with him. I learned about him through Travis Fristow. Um, Mickey Zakili in Providence had a really great series called Rav for many years, and she was one of my closest comics friends. Um, yeah, just I mean, Brian Chippendale is still like he's still publishing all kinds of stuff. He's in Rhode Island as well. Yeah, yeah, it just goes on.
How did you meet all of them? By mailing comics back and forth? The ones in different states?
Well, I moved around a lot. Like
Okay.
when I left Gainesville, I moved to Providence, Rhode Island, which is just like it was basically like grad school for me because the Rhode Island School of Design is there, but also there's this community of like musicians and screen printers and comics people and just weirdos in general
Oh,
who operate outside of the scholastic bubble, and that was like a community in the truest sense of the word, as far as
that's
like
awesome.
everyone living in group houses and having music events at their houses, and we would screen print flyers for the shows. And especially with Brian Chippendale, like it got really competitive. So you're learning in public. You have
Mm-hmm.
to make the most amount, like the highest print run with the most number of colors, and get them in the most obscure places in the city. And you know that no matter what you do, Brian is going to have already gotten there. You
No.
can't wheat. Yeah, you can literally go like into a train tunnel, and Brian already has a piece wheat pasted onto the wall. So yeah,
That's I love that you're just sticking comics places. Is that basically what it was?
no, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I wish it was like that where I walked around and I found people sticking comics places. I'm gonna have to go sticking comics places.
I mean, you really should.
I will. I will.
Yeah.
It's when I figure out printing better. I hate printers, dude. Oh god. Um okay. What about shows or cons? Did you ever go to any of those?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. But wait, put a pin in that for 1 second. I want to give
Okay.
you a piece of advice
All right. I'm
about
putting a pin
about
in it.
printing.
Right.
Okay, hold on
Yes.
1 second. This is the best hack if you're using a home printer
Yep.
to make
Right
comics.
over there. Off
Because
screen.
I've got the zine machine. I've got like the Epson Workforce WF7710, which is discontinued. But I think you can do this with most home printers.
Hmm.
There's a hack you can look up. Um, and if anybody looks at this in the future, don't tell Epson. But do you know about this?
I do not. Is it a
It
special ink?
it is film direct
Mm.
blocking dye. And I
Oh,
use this because because I make a lot of screen prints.
Mm-hmm.
So I expose from clear acetates. But you can hack the ink cartridge on your machine to turn all the colors into black, and you feed it with this,
Mm-hmm.
and you use a syringe to
Oh
put it
wow.
into your ink carousel. And like this has lasted me for 3 years because,
Amazing.
as we all know, the major cost of running a home printer is the ink.
Yeah, it's so
So
dumb.
so yeah, there are ways around that. So anyway, just want to pass that on.
How'd
Film
you figure
direct.
how'd you figure that little tip out?
Um,
Experimentation?
one of my friends who makes bootleg t-shirts had found it
Okay.
out, and he told me about it.
That's nice. The information will be passed along to the future generations.
Okay,
But
good.
not Epson. Not Epson. They don't get to know.
Yeah, they don't get to know.
Do you remember your first show in con experience? Back to that, I assume.
Um, well, yeah, it would have been I can't remember what they called it, but it was in Bowling Green, Ohio. Um, Travis Fristo and I went from Gainesville, and it was more just a zine thing.
Hmm.
Like back then, there was this like artificial separation between like comics and zines. Like zines were punk and comics were for nerds.
Hmm.
Um, but that was like the first like community building exercise. And then I went to SPX a couple of years with Travis as well. And that was like the first like big comics thing. But I mean, hands down. Oh, and Cake in Chicago. I went to that a couple times. That show rules. Um, I've almost gone to TCAF many times, but have had to cancel at the last minute. Um, but the best show, I think, hands down, is Comic Art Brooklyn.
Ooh,
Um,
okay.
because I lived in New York for a bunch of years, and Gabe Fowler, who runs Desert Island Comics,
Hmm.
is he would put on Comic Art Brooklyn once a year, and it started in like a church basement
Yeah.
and grew into one of the biggest shows outside of SPX. I don't think it happens anymore, but that
Yeah,
was
I've
like
never
the
heard of it,
true.
so that's
I'm
interesting.
sorry.
I've never heard of it, so it might not be going on
Yeah,
anymore.
yeah, I think it stopped a few years back. It just got too big for Gabe, but it was the ultimate Venn diagram of like scrappy punk self-publishers, and like Chris Ware would come. Everybody was there. And
Really
then
cool.
and then afterwards there would be like the after party at this place called the Comic the Comic House. And
Very literal.
yeah, and like I just remember like Art Spiegelman was there, like smoking inside, you know, like just everybody was there.
That's wild. New York's
Yeah.
crazy. I need to go back.
Sometimes it's crazy.
But it can be crazy in a good way. Like that's crazy in a good way.
Yeah, that's
Which
crazy in a good way, but
sure.
most of my memories of New York are working to afford to live in New York.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's another problem. But visiting.
Visiting school.
Yeah, for sure. That's all I've ever done. So, when would you say you felt most connected in the comics community?
Um, well, just I lived in Providence for 7 years, and I was largely unaware of like the outside world,
Hmm.
but everybody was self-publishing something there.
Hmm.
And so, and you would also see them all the time. Like everybody went to shows and everybody went to dinner at each other's houses. And it's a small town, so you can't go out to coffee without it turning into like a 2 hour visit. So that was definitely the most like connected in a real world way. But I really felt like recognized when Jason Miles got me a publishing deal with when Fantagraphics started like their underground imprint.
Yeah,
He got he got a book published for me through them,
awesome.
and that was I'm like, oh wow, I'm a real person now. And then when I did my first signing at Comic Art Brooklyn with that book, and only like six people cared, and then I got like one check for like $110 from Fantagraphics and never heard anything about the thing again.
Dang
So
publishing.
yeah, it just went from like I'm in the game to I am completely finished with this.
No, publishing's so brutal. I'm so
Yeah.
scared of it. So scary. Um, we already talked about most significant peers in comics, unless you want to add any more on that. Oh, here's a question. Did you ever do collaborations or art jams with your peers in comics?
Oh, absolutely. I have in my flat file, there's like still that was like a big part of just socializing in
Yeah.
Providence. Like we used to go out, a bunch of us used to go out for pizza and at this one particular place in Rhode Island, and we would all just pass the table mats around and do
Amazing.
do jam drawings, and I saved all those. I used to draw a lot with Xander Morrow in Rhode Island was one of my favorite people to draw with. Mickey Zakili and I would draw a lot. Um, Jacob Berendez is also a Rhode Island guy. Um, yeah, that all the time. Like that was just a thing. Or like one issue of scenery was all other people's art, like other people's comics.
That's awesome.
Um, yeah, all the time.
How did doing art jams and collabs like that affect your own work, do you think?
Well, it just made me more competitive. You know, like I keep on mentioning Mickey Zakili, but we did this thing one night where we just went. I had a studio in this abandoned building, and we're like, we're gonna draw for 24 hours, and
Dang.
and and we did. Um, um, yeah, just there's an artist named Jim Drain who now mostly does like textile sculptures,
Oh wow, okay.
but he did excuse me,
Don't worry about it.
but
I'm surprised I haven't sneezed yet.
there's a comics anthology in Providence called Paper Rodeo, and it came out like every couple of months, and it was like a big newspaper.
Yeah.
Um, and now like they just go for incredible amounts of money on eBay, but everybody contributed to that, and a lot of times I would draw with Jem leading up to our contributions for that, and I stole so much from him, like
Hmm.
that. I mean, I would always try to draw with the person I thought was the best so I could like steal from them.
Yeah, well
And I
that
still
makes
do that.
I
Yeah.
mean, I I've gotten that advice to do that. I've just got to get out there and find these good artists. There's not there's not a lot in the small town I'm in north of Gainesville, but I'll find him
Yeah.
sometime.
No, you don't have to meet them in person anymore, but it's
That's true.
nice.
I would like to meet them in person though.
Yeah. What small town are you in?
It's called Brooker, and no one's
Yeah,
ever heard of it.
I've heard of it. Yeah.
Really
I
wild.
mean, I've, I drive around a lot.
Because there's nothing here. Um, did you ever I assume you did trade or sell your first comics that you were making?
Mostly trade, but
Okay.
yeah.
How
Yeah,
did
I'm sorry, go ahead.
how did you go about finding people to trade them to and doing that in the early days of your comic work?
Fact sheet 5.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I I know we don't need Fact Sheet 5 anymore because of the internet, but I wish we did still have something like that because it's less scary than the internet, in my opinion.
Well, yeah. Well, the internet's just too much. It
Yeah,
is so nice to have this one concentrated thing that's just for you and your people.
Exactly,
and
yeah.
you don't have to do all the searching, it comes to you and you can just assume that a lot of people in that inch thick of newsprint are like kind of like-minded people.
Yeah, it's much less overwhelming, I feel too, if you just have all of it right there where you want it. What were other comics do you remember being traded around that time?
Uh, Nothing that anyone would have heard of. Yeah, just really local stuff to like Columbus, Georgia, Phoenix City, Alabama, maybe Atlanta. Um, and then it wasn't until later in high school that like I became aware of like Comet Bus fanzine, like
Yeah.
maybe arguably the biggest fanzine ever.
Mhm.
Um, and that's more what I was tuned into, like people just making like Xerox music fanzines.
Yeah, music. I love how music and comics interconnect. I've always wanted to do a bunch of comics that use lyrics from songs as the words for the pictures to go and balance it out. That's always something I've been really interested in doing.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That thing I was talking about in the very beginning of the interview, the "We Don't Go to Their Parties" anthology. My contribution, I just took a Mark Twain short story and cut it up and put it into word bubbles.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love combining other artists' works and making it into comics. I just think it's the coolest thing.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a thing. There's a legacy there.
were you ever involved in distribution collectives like Puppy Toss or Fandom House or Spit and a Half?
Um, I mean, I definitely was distributed through Spit and a Half and Microcosm, uh, a bunch more places. Wow, cool, Stick Figure, but I wasn't like involved in the distribution end.
Mhm.
I I just like knew those people and they carried my stuff.
It sounds less stressful than trying to do distributing yourself. Also, another
Yeah,
scary problem
I
with printers.
I mean that's largely why I stopped making the zine is like I just don't like selling things.
Yeah, I
Um,
get that.
it was easier. Like I used to be in a band and we would tour a lot. I mean, I'm still in a band, but not a band that tours. Um, and it was just easy. You set up the table with records and you just put your zines out and people come to you. It's just like
Yeah.
being at a being at one of the comic shows, but you're in a different town every night.
That's I it's really interesting you mentioned you're in a band because I've noticed that a lot of people that were making zines and mini comics in the 90s are into making music now.
Yeah, yeah.
What are your
I mean,
thoughts
to
on
me, it's
that?
always been that way.
They're interconnected?
I really think so. Like
Yeah.
when I design a record cover, like everything I learned from self-publishing, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Okay, that's I think that's a really interesting combination. Like I do comics, but I could never do music because I don't have that. But that's cool that so
no,
many of
yeah, you
the
do. You do. Don't say that. I mean, the definition of music is even wider than the definition of comics.
I
There are
suppose
there are no rules.
I feel more comfortable drawing though for sure.
That's fine. But just don't say you couldn't do it because you can.
It would be interesting. I can tell you that. My brother's the musical one. He'll do the music, and I'll do his album covers or something. I don't know.
For now, things
Yeah,
might change.
maybe I'll switch. Um, in the wrapping up questions, which are always good ones because it's like Tom put the best questions for last.
Okay.
Um, what were your thoughts on all of that going on at that time? Like, what do you think of this whole idea of just like people making comics and just trading them around and their artwork just being, flying everywhere to each other? What were your thoughts
I,
of it all the time?
I mean, I love it. I mean, that's the point. Um, I can say there's not a lot of comics I see these days that speak to me. Um, but that's not the important part at all. Um, I just love, I think comics right now are
Mm-hmm.
the past, I don't know, 12 years is like a super important time because it's a lot, it may be demystified. There's more people doing it.
For
It's
sure.
definitely queerer than when I grew up, which is nothing but positive. Um, just a lot of barriers to entry have fallen away.
Yeah.
Um, as much as I'm a fan of gatekeeping, um, it's less gatekeeping, which,
Hmm.
that's good too. Um, I don't know, I love it. Like whether it be, an edition of one wheat pasted on a wall,
Hmm.
or whether it be a traditional publisher like Domino or something. Like I know Domino isn't really that traditional, but yeah, I love it. And if you feel the call, if you hear the call, pick up the phone, you know?
What do you miss most about the pre-internet days of making comics?
Gatekeeping. Um, I I mean, it's almost pointless to talk about because there's no going back, but I I I'm not gonna say anything that any 50-year-old guy wouldn't say. Like it was beneficial to be geographically close to other people making weird stuff. Um, but at the same time, I knew most of those people through letters anyway.
Hmm.
So it's, just paper internet.
Paper internet. It still sounds to me, and who grew up in an internet world, it still sounds so much more magical to have a paper internet. Or
I mean, it is more magical, but for every one thing that you hold dear, that's a thing that someone somewhere else can't have.
yeah.
And that's what makes it special. Um, you know, rarity of whether it be a commodity or an experience is what makes something special. So if more people can have that, then I assume that's a good thing generally.
Hmm. But it does feel less personal, maybe because it's all out in the world, and less just you
Yes,
and your buddies. Like
yeah.
that's something I can imagine. Like it feels a little a less. It feels more impersonal to post thing on the internet than it does to send it out to a select mailing list. I would assume.
I mean, yes, and I agree with you 100%, but also I don't think that the Gutenberg press made the Bible any less special.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I guess there's I guess the whole point of these interviews is to realize that there are pros and cons to before the internet and after the internet for the comic scene. That
Yeah,
it was
for sure.
bad in different ways. What do
Yeah,
you think personally has changed for the better about it about the internet and comics?
accessibility.
Mhm.
I mean, that's the only pro, but it's a huge pro.
It is
Um,
huge.
yeah. Uh, I mean, nothing beats holding a printed object in your hands. I still prefer that. But if someone like recommends me an artist now, I can just look it up. I put it into my notes app and look it up later. I don't have to try to find their address in Maximum Rock and Roll or Fact Sheet 5 and write to them with 50 cents taped to a note card so I can get a copy.
Yeah, I mean, that's cool, but also not as easy.
Yeah, yeah. But maybe things should be hard. I don't know.
I guess it's all just it's I feel like honestly, as someone who grew up in the internet age, I don't even have a right to comment on it. Like I don't even know what that was like not having the internet. I don't know, it's just wild. It's wild to think about.
Yeah, sure. But it's your world now.
Yeah, it's
So
all I've
that's
ever
awesome.
known.
Yeah.
um Before we go, can you tell us one more memory of your comic making days? Something funny or special?
It was all funny and special. I don't know. I don't know. I got in trouble once for a paper rodeo comic that I made about assaulting someone. Like I got I ride my bike everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
and a car swerved at me.
Mm-hmm.
And so the fantasy in my head when this happens is I take my U-lock and I drag the person out of the car and destroy them physically, which I never did, but I made a comic about that.
It would be a
And
different story if you really did. An interesting
yeah,
one.
exactly. Um, no, but I was like, oh man, this is a very like punk comic anthology. I can do whatever I want. And you can do whatever you want, but like people were people were like, man, that was really fucked up what you did. I'm like, well, I didn't do it. I just made a comic about it. And they're like, yeah, still. I don't know, lots stories like that because
That
so
is
much of
so wild that people would get mad over that because I've seen much worse fantasies portrayed in comics before
oh,
than that for sure. I was like, that
for sure.
doesn't sound near as bad as some other stuff I've seen. But
Right.
all right, who are three people you would recommend eye contact to do an interview with for this series?
Um, do they have to be famous?
No, they
I
just have
mean,
to be contactable. That's the
um,
only, and they had to have made comics or something like it in the days before the internet. Those are the
I
only qualifications.
well, I would say Jacob Berendez
Mm-hmm.
of Providence, Rhode Island is someone to talk to. He's younger a little bit
Mm-hmm.
and definitely worked a lot with the internet. He also like runs websites and stuff, but he has one of the most unique takes on small run
Yeah,
community print items. And he also makes like things like stuffed animals and stuff that I would say function in the same idiom of zines and comics.
that's really cool. I
Um,
mean, you can't see all of my collection, but I am obviously a stuffed animal fan. So
oh, well then you've got a treat coming to you. His website is called Fujichia,
okay,
Fujichia.
thank you. I'll be looking that
Um,
up.
who else? I mean, most of the people I know are like kind of common knowledge. Like you've spoken to John Porcellino already,
We have him
right?
on. I didn't get to. It was the previous intern, but yes, we have him on
Yeah.
here.
I mean, to me, he's like the guy. You're probably not going to get to talk to Gary Panner, but I mean, he's the dude. Um, Gabrielle Bell is huge to me. Um, yeah, I think I said three.
Okay. Yep,
Yeah.
those were definitely three.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you for your time, and thank you for answering my long list of questions.
No, thanks, Maren. It was good to meet you.
Thanks for joining us. This has been a production of the Sequential Artists Workshop, or SAW. You can find us on social media at Comics Workshop and online at sawcomics.org. You can hear about our many courses at learn.sawcomics.org. SAW is a nonprofit and supported by people like you. Learn how to make a tax-deductible donation at the donate page of sawcomics.org. You can join our free community of comics explorers at members.sawcomics.org. Thanks so much for being here.